you kind of need to, gird thy loins a little bit. Well, hello and welcome back to Lap of the World. I'm Richard. If this is your first time watching, normally on here I'm in the process of trying to drive as many road courses as I can in my 1992 Acura NSX with currently 280,000 miles on it. Now if that sounds entertaining to you, don't forget to click the subscribe button to get any updates when I'm able to check another track off the list, or if I post a video like today where I'm working on something a little bit different in the garage. If you've watched the last couple of videos, after a fun week out in Monterey, enjoying the festivities, somewhat courtesy of Acura and the NSX Club, so thanks again to them, we're back and looking to get finished up with some projects so we can actually get back out to some racetracks. Now today I'm working on what I've been lovingly referring to as the Lap of the World backup car, which is my new to me 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo. Now, I posted a video a little while ago of kind of all the stuff that needs done to this car, but today specifically we're going to start addressing some of the issues with the transmission. Now this car is a gated manual, so we're not dealing with any e-gear pumps or hydraulic shenanigans like that. Really what we're dealing with is stupidity. Anyone who's kind of mechanically inclined, or if you started to do even basic fluid changes in your car, knows good and well that you don't reuse crush washers. Apparently, when you own a, near six-figure Lamborghini, that somehow gets lost in the mix. I don't even know. Anyhow, so let me take you around to the back of the car. I'll show you exactly what we're working on today, why we're working on it today, and then we'll actually get started doing a transmission fluid change in a 2004 Gallardo. Alright, so we are around at the back of the car looking at the tail end of the transaxle case. This being the back cover that you can often see through the rear bumper of most Gallardos. This is where we're going to start. So, you have some fittings back here. I'll see if I can zoom in and get to focus. You have a couple of fittings back here. Now, the upper fitting here is for the transmission fluid oil pump. Just to circulate things and keep the, it goes out to a cooler and then comes back into the loop. And then this bottom section, I wouldn't really call it a fitting, but this right here is it's a filter basically. So you pull that out and there's a tube there with a metal screen in it and an O-ring. Now, normally I would suspect the O-ring before anything else, but what I did was to see where the leak was starting, is I cleaned everything off, and then it became pretty clear that where it's actually leaking from is this back O-ring, or the inside, the inside crush washer on this banjo fitting. It's distinctly leaking from there, and just looking at that, I'm not entirely convinced. Looking at how close the O-ring is, let's see how close I can actually focus in on this, or how tight I can get. Yeah, so if you look at this outer O-ring, or I keep saying O-ring, I'm sorry. If you look at the outer crush washer here, copper thing in there, it is almost like protruding beyond the flaps on the hex bolt, on the banjo bolt there, which really kind of makes me think it may not be the correct size of crush washer there. Now, I won't know until I remove them really and compare them with the new ones what's going on there, but that's kind of my suspicion for the moment, is those may be incorrectly sized and or incorrectly torqued. Now the latter I can understand because the Lamborghini shop manual does not include torque specs for hardly anything, which is really disappointing. Now the second place at issue is in fact the drain bolt. There's also a crush washer on this, and again, after cleaning it off and letting it sit for a week while we were in California, it is distinctly leaking right around that fitting. So, I have suspicions about that as well, that someone reused a crush washer and or has mistorqued or otherwise abused that drain plug. Looking further up here, where it's not leaking, fortunately, the oil level check port So essentially, when you do the transmission oil change, you remove this bolt or this plug, and then you're able to see, basically you can tell it's full when stuff starts to dribble out of that hole. At that point, you have enough fluid in the system. The fill plug is actually on top of the transmission behind the air box. All right, before we get started, here's kind of the mise en place for this project. I got some duplicates here and there, so I got an extra drain plug up here in case the one I take out is mangled, and that was mainly just a precaution. It wasn't that expensive, but I'd hate to get that out and realize that somebody had completely mangled it and then be waiting on parts just to put anything back together at all. I've got O-rings, one extra in case it got damaged in the process. I got O-rings for the filter, crush washers for the drain plug and check port, and crush washers for the banjo fitting. Now, when I bought the car, it allegedly came with some of this stuff. So the previous owner understood that it had this issue, and I don't know. I have questions, because if I pull these out, this is what it came with. So this guy is probably the correct diameter, but if I could focus on this and see what it's doing here. Yeah, so shows up on camera, this thing is A, not round, and B, it has been chowdered. There is dents and dings and scratches and stuff all over this thing. So either this is one that came off, or it was some improper rituals were observed in storage and transportation here that resulted in this being essentially, this thing's useless. Now, it also came with what were allegedly banjo fittings. But I don't even need to pull those close to the camera to see what's wrong with those. Those are not the correct diameter of washer. So the ones in the bag here, these larger diameter ones, these came from Bull Stuff, who I'll give a little shout out to because they've been great as far as answering questions and expediting parts and stuff like that. And I trust their parts diagram and their judgment. These are from unknown origins, and I don't even know if they'll fit, never mind anything else. So, these are not, it's not like it's an expensive thing. These are not really exotic. I think these were like $2 a piece. These are maybe $3.50 each. So these are not super expensive. I mean, they're probably expensive for little rings of copper, but yeah, I just don't understand the... Anyway, let's get started with a change, and we will, we'll see who's right and who's wrong then, I guess. Okay, order of operations. The first thing I'm going to do is crack open the 22 millimeter check port there. Then I will take out the drain plug and drain the fluid into the pan. Once that's done, I'm going to use a pump rather than going to the top of the car and dealing with the very hard to get to dedicated fill port. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a piece of plastic tube from a pump, hand pump, almost like hand soap or something like that. They make kind of an industrial version for automotive fluids. I'm going to run a tube into the check port, and I'm going to pump it in there until it starts to come out. And I'm expecting that will require me to use the standard 4 quarts that the car calls for, at which point there will be enough fluid in the system and there's no reason to get to the upper fill port. But I do want to crack open the check port first just to make sure that I have access to a way of getting fluid back in before I drain all of the fluid out. Alright, so now with the check plug loose, as you can tell by the mismatched paint marks and the fact that it's starting to weep a little bit, we are now good to drain the transmission fluid out of the main drain plug down here. Now, if you've never done a transmission or gear oil change before, you kind of need to gird your loins a little bit for this. It is maybe the nastiest smelling thing that you can do with a car, and it's really never any fun. So I've got my gloves on. I'm going to put the camera well away from where I'm working for a minute here, and see if I can find a clothespin to put on my nose. All right. Well, with everything unplugged and drained at this point in time, let's go over to the bench and see what we pulled out. Well, starting out, there's your problem. That is all that came off when I unscrewed the drain plug, the main drain plug from the transaxle. And you'll note there the distinct absence of any kind of crush washer. So there's not even a reused crush washer, there just wasn't a crush washer. So, I mean, if you want something to leak, that's a good place to start. Now, the rest of what we pulled out is largely good news. You can see, I'll zoom back in on it, but the top of the drain plug, which is magnetic, it does have some debris and light schmoo on it, but there are no, you can, see if I can get it to focus there. Right, so no like glitter or big flakes of anything, which is what you want. You kind of expect some powdered particulate, but you don't want any big chunks. The other filter, zoom in on that, it has some schmoo on it, and I did some research, and apparently this is somewhat to be expected. The orangey red bits there are actually just the RTV gasket type sealant from the transmission case when it was installed. That's just probably left over from the factory. This may be the first time this filter's been pulled out. And then there aren't really any other, there's one little flake in there of substance, but really nothing else. So anyway, the hopeful long and short of it is that the transmission is in good health. Both of the other drain plugs, or the, what would I call that, the level checking plug and the banjo bolt, all look in good condition. And it does appear that the, interestingly enough, I had raised that question mark earlier, but the crush washers that were on the banjo bolt appear to be the correct crush washers. I just have a feeling it may not have been torqued down to spec, because there is no torque spec given. These guys each go to 45 Newton meters, or about 34 and some change foot-pounds. This guy, which is the same diameter head as this guy, but doesn't list a torque spec. So I'm going to have to kind of either use the same torque spec and hope that doesn't break anything, or see if I can find some equivalent on the NSX, because it's the same aluminum casing, steel bolt into aluminum casing, and see what I can, interpolate from there. So at this point, I'm going to get this stuff all cleaned up and or discarded as is appropriate, and then we'll put it back in and put some fluid back in and see where we get to from there. Okay, so back underneath the car, I went ahead and just installed the new drain plug that I purchased. The old one was fine, but it wasn't really cleaning up entirely, so since I had the new one, I decided to go ahead and use it. It is installed, as you can see, with a crush washer and was installed with a torque wrench to 45 Newton meters. Further back, I repeated that process with the banjo fitting, also torquing it to 45 Newton meters, which didn't seem to cause any issues, so hopefully that is enough to appropriately engage the smushiness of the crush washers and eliminate this leak as well. I also cleaned and reinstalled the little filter cartridge assembly here. Again there, I used a new O-ring and was careful not to over-tighten the small 8mm retention bolt. So the next thing I'm going to do is get underneath the car and see if I can get situated with my pump assembly here, along with the requisite number of quart bottles of Audi transmission fluid, and we'll see if we can't get her filled back up. I apologize for not having a whole lot of my actual wrenching and stuff on camera. Working solo and my hands being occasionally covered in transmission fluid has kind of precluded handling the camera. Here's the pump I'll be using. I got this either from a car parts chain store or Amazon, one of the two. But it's got this little barbed end on it that fits into the fill hole to keep it in place, and then it has this pump, which is just kind of like a scaled up version of the guts of your hand soap pump or something like that. So since I have showing you in here, since I have the fender liners off to work on other things like the catalytic converters, I'm going to take advantage of that and the ability to then go in and actually put this tube in more or less horizontally, or even a little bit above horizontal, so I can, gravity will help me a little bit, and I have the drain plug or drain pan then positioned under the hole for anything that decides to not go or not stay in once I start pumping. So yeah, I'm gonna put the camera down here because this is gonna get you know, in spite of my best efforts, it's probably gonna get messy. So I will pick you guys back up with an update here shortly. All right, well, we seem to have met with some success with our transmission fluid change. In the process of filling it, I had to go a little slower with the pumping action than I anticipated. There was some kind of obstruction, probably a big ring gear or something like that right behind the check port. So if I tried to put too much in at once, it would kind of burp back at me. But apart from that, having to go a little slower, the car did take on board almost exactly the 4 liters of fluid that the manual specified before it started sort of leaking out. So which is how you check the level, just put stuff in until it leaks out. So those two things lining up kind of give me some reassurance that I've done things correctly here. So yeah, and I've been watching it. It is actually the next day, hence the this is not a continuity faux pas. It is actually next day, hence the new shirt. But things did change. You're not crazy. But yeah, so I've been watching it overnight, and it has not leaked. I put the fill plug back in, or the check plug back in at the specified 45 newton meters. That seems to have done the trick. So now we get to move on to other things. So what's actually left to do before I can actually get this thing out and horse around with it a little bit? Well, the next video is either going to be getting this exhaust at least mocked up in the back, because I have to fabricate some brackets to move a couple of the mounting points, which I'll get into detail on in that video, or it'll be replacing some coolant hoses, one of the two. I am still waiting on one part to come in, and the part I'm waiting on is this little doodad. Now, not the filler cap itself. There's nothing wrong with this filler cap apart from being kind of dirty around the edges from wrap adhesive, but the plastic bucket and more importantly the rubber shrouding down here. Yeah, there's actually nothing wrong with the plastic bucket, and I thought I was going to luck out because you can tell there this has an Audi part number on it, and that Audi part number actually cross-references, to an A2, European model A2. Unfortunately, the rubber molding down here is apparently unique to the Gallardo. In the A2, its filler net goes through the center, and if you look at it this way, it is pretty much flat across the bottom, whereas the A2 follows more of this contour, because in the A2 it's on the side of a car, probably this way or this way, versus being nearly vertical on the Lamborghini. But so I thought I was going to get lucky with that, ended up not, but this is on the way again from Bull Stuff, and so once that comes in, I'll have to transfer over my yellow gas cap and try not to destroy it in the process, and then put this thing back in the car. Aside from that, though, it's just really an issue of reinstalling the lights on the car, the tail lights and the marker lights, now that they've been polished out to their original color. And then double checking my ride height, locking everything down, and then going and getting the car aligned, and then probably corner balanced as well at some point. But that's, I'm reasonably sure I can get it close enough at least to go and get a shakedown run in or something like that. So yeah, hopefully, light at the end of the tunnel. Fingers crossed I'm done with this before the I'm shooting for within the next month. What that looks like in video terms, I don't know, but hopefully I'll have some other stuff going on, some track days here in the meantime, but we will see. But for now, I'm going to call it there. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this sort of, these little how-to videos, don't forget to click the subscribe button, click a like on the video so I know you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I'm Richard, this is Lap of the World, and I will see you in the next video, if not at the track.